Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Smart Money Show. I'm one of your co-hosts, Ali Suleiman, as usual, and I'm very privileged to be joined by my fellow co-host, Naman Akhtar. How are you, bro?
I'm all good. Exams are right around the corner, so I guess that's where my mind is these days, but all good. What about yourself?
Yeah, literally the same, man. I got finals coming up. I can't believe I'm going into my third year soon, my final year, which is pretty crazy. But working on the show always has pays its dividends, lets me take my mind off things, and sort of our first sort of amazing list of episodes has been really good. So looking forward to getting into who we have on today. Do you want to do the due diligence on that?
Yeah, of course. So the guest we have on today is someone that you may already know from TikTok and his TikTok page. His name is Jack, or more commonly known as the Korean Consultant. Now, he is someone who's amassed more than 30,000 followers on his Instagram and TikTok, and his channel is kind of got the same aim as us, demystifying the financial service sector, and it's geared towards students like we do as well. He creates unique forms of content with a flawless mix between comedy and also genuine learning. Now, beyond his social media presence, as his name implies, he's got a range of different experiences within the consulting field, and right now works at a top firm, think MBB, with more than 5 years of experience within the industry. And in this episode, we'll be delving into his university life, what interests were, what made him initially interested in the financial services sector, how was he proactive during those years, more about consulting in itself, career progression, tips for students, and of course, we will be talking about his TikTok as well. Now, I know my intro didn't do it justice at all, but today's guest is someone who's really strong and a lot of tips for you guys, and of course, ourselves, me and Ali as well. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome on Jack to the show. Jack, how's it going?
Hey guys, hey, hello everyone. Nice to meet you all. My name is Jack, or also commonly known as the Korean Consultant, as you introduced. Thanks for having me, Naman and Ali. Really appreciate it. I've seen a couple of your episodes before as well, and I think it's a really good initiative to do this, especially from a student stage as well, because I only started after graduating, but at the same time, I was interested in both, obviously, the financial sector and consulting as well. But for me, as an international student myself, there wasn't enough information out there, especially accessible to students from, I guess, a bit more disadvantaged background like myself. So, yeah, really, really, appreciate, and I think it's a great initiative that you guys are doing here, and super happy to be here with you guys.
Thank you so much for your kind words. It's just all about, yeah, as I said in the intro, our aim is very similar. It's just helping people break into the sector and just demystifying it as much as possible. So it's going to be a really interesting episode. So Ali, if you'd like to, do you want to kick things off?
100%, I'll be on it. So, Jack, the way we like to sort of preface the episode with every guest is a very general question, and we want you to take it whatever you feel. So what was it like for you growing up, and what's your education journey been like?
Yeah, honestly, that's such a good question. And to be honest, like if you guys have seen my LinkedIn, you will probably think, oh, this is some other privileged private school kid that has made his way up to LSE and had a very perfect path towards consulting, finance, whatever. And I guess on the one hand, it might be true, but on the other hand, there's a background story to that. So I actually grew up really poor. Growing up, so four of my family, so my dad, my mom, my brother, and I, we basically stayed in a one room until I was about the age of 7 or 8. So till then, I didn't really even have the chance to eat a lot of meat as well growing up. So very, very sort of poor area, still within Seoul, but think very east side of Seoul, more like sort of Stratford and beyond if you think about London. So growing up, I was quite I guess I wouldn't say dirt poor, but sort of alongside sort of the lower income family hold, because my dad was still trying to figure things out. And then, fortunately enough, my dad was able to land in the role in one of the large conglomerates in Korea, and then he had the opportunity to move to China and set up sort of a branch there. So that was sort of the start of, I guess, sort of flourishing for our family, because then we started to get a bit more increased income. I was able to have meat more than once a day, etc. So since then on, so basically just coming back to the basics, I was born in Korea, but then I grew up in China, spent about 10 years or more of my lifetime in China, moving between Guangzhou, Beijing, etc. So funny enough, a lot of people say, why is your English accent so weird? It's because First of all, it's sort of mixed across Korean, Chinese, and English. And second of all, English is actually my third language. So I
Wow.
don't know many vocabularies in English. I picked it up when I was 13 when I entered an international school. So that's sort of the background story. So international school wise, I did go to a school called Harrow, which obviously a lot of you will think, wow, Harrow, the one in London, that's very posh and prestigious. And to be honest, the one in China, it's not as prestigious. First of all, it's not an all boys school, it's a sort of a mixed school. And second of all, as
Yeah.
long as you have sort of the money, you can get in. And that being said, because my dad was sort of an expatriate for a company, that's how I was able to go in with scholarship as well. So not because we're rich, but because I studied hard to get that. And yeah, so I spent about 10 years in China, did my A levels there, obviously at a British school, and then had the opportunity to come to LSE for my undergrad. The background story to that is actually at the age of 16, my dad had to go back to Korea. But I said, you know what, Dad, I really want to come to London. I had this obsession about Harry Potter. I don't know why. Almost named myself Harry as well. Yeah, luckily I didn't because I know another Korean who also named himself Harry after Harry Potter. But anyways, I stayed in China for my final 2 years of A levels, and then yeah, came to the UK for uni. Did my bachelor's and my master's at LSE. I stupidly I did management twice, so I did bachelor's in management at LSE, and then I did a master's in management, which I think to myself was probably a dumb decision, but then again at the same time it allowed me to get a job in the UK. So in terms of ROI and as you guys call it in finance, it was worth it for me. And then yeah, I mean, after graduating, I was fortunate enough to work in a boutique consulting firm, which then I leveraged the opportunity to then land a role at a tier two consulting firm called EY Parthenon. Spent about a year and a half, almost 2 years there, and then again was very lucky to have been given the opportunity to join one of the large consulting firms, and have been here for about 3.5 years now, focusing a lot on private equity, FS kind of projects, but also at the same time, growth strategy, Gen AI team, digital transformation, and all sorts of other projects here. And yeah, so coming up to 5+ years in consulting, and yeah, I guess that's sort of my journey in a nutshell.
Wow, I mean, it's so interesting that you've had like such a varied experiences, like even early on, because I think that must have played like a significant role in shaping the person you are today. Living on, I know it sounds weird, but like on the living with more of a struggle and then like living with a bit of an easier life. So I guess that's really interesting how that's shaped your character. But then talking more than directly about the whole finance part of this, then what do you think initially sparked your interest within the industry, and then how's that interest evolved over time?
Interesting question. So, as you guys know, especially I think LSE students will empathize with me, is once you enter first year at LSE, and maybe same for other universities nowadays with the information availability, the first thing students ask you is, which spring weeks have you applied to? And at
Yeah.
the same time, in my first year, I landed in, here I am, hoping to make friends, and all they're asking is CVs, internships, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, these names that I've never heard before coming to LSE. Because I mean, honestly, for me, coming into LSE as an international student was already a big enough achievement. And I thought, okay, I'm at a big name university now. My life is set. I'm going to get all these jobs. Well, obviously I was wrong because all my peers have already applied for all these internships, already started networking with all these finance bros at the first week of LSE. So that's how I sort of first heard about the financial services industry, investment banking, PE, asset management, wealth management, consulting as well, and even law. All of these things sort of came to my mind around sort of the first month or two at LSE. And even then, I wasn't super interested in it because I actually didn't know what I wanted to do, which is, again, one of the reasons why I chose consulting, but we can talk about that later. So I guess like in terms of financial services, I actually wanted to become an investment banker because I love money. I want to be honest about it. Obviously, other things matter too, but compensation and monetary value is one of the things that motivate me and drive me, especially coming from a less sort of well-off family. A lot of the emphasis in my family was get a good job that pays you enough money. So that was sort of, I guess, a hinge on my mind for a long time. So, and I heard investment bankers earn six figures. I think back then they may not have had the cap on bonus, which is 100% of your
Yeah.
salary. I think they recently removed it as well, but that existed for a long time.
Yeah.
But I think during my first year, which was almost 10 years ago, they didn't have that, I think. So I mean, I was hearing some ridiculous numbers in my ears, and I was like, that's actually a crazy number that my dad has never even touched. So that's why I wanted to do investment banking, if I'm being brutally honest. And yeah, I mean, I applied to loads of spring weeks, all the ones I could think of. I networked a lot with different professionals. Luckily enough, having the LSE name value allowed me to sort of network with people in Canary Wharf. I even went up to the streets and started to talk to people as well, trying to get some attention from them, do some cold calling. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to land any internships, and in the second year, I think I sort of pivoted my way into more consulting. But that, I guess, like was sort of the first initial spark in the financial services sector for me.
Well, that was a great answer, and I think ourselves, but also our listeners and viewers, really appreciate the transparency as well in that answer. And I think at the time, not securing an internship, it must have hurt a little bit. I mean, especially that for myself, I'm in my second year, some applications as well, and including Springs.
It's tough.
You always have the fear of, exactly, it's very tough. And you always have the fear of, what if I don't get anything? And at the time, it feels like be all and end all, but obviously now looking back, hindsight is a very powerful thing. You spoke about networking, you spoke about going out there, putting yourself out there, applying, etc. So all of these things together, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced when you were exploring this industry, but before you kind of pivoted to consulting?
Honestly, for me, it was the availability of information, actually. And I think that's why I'm saying, what you guys are doing is actually very, very interesting. And I would have loved to have this show when I was a student, right? Because coming from an international background and in my first year, obviously my English has improved a lot, but in my first year of university, my English was still fresh. Like people will call me a fool, right? Fresh off the boat, right? My English wasn't very good. It was very hard for me to network. At the same time, there wasn't a lot of Koreans as well in London that were actually in the financial services industry in itself, or even let alone any other industry in London working as a professional. So with no ties in London, with limited English proficiency, and also, I guess, also like my extracurriculars and my work experiences wasn't at the top level compared to other candidates at LSE. I guess like it was very challenging for me to even find a place to look and be like, hey, I can go to this blog or I can watch this podcast, get all the information I need to apply into banking. So, I mean, I obviously when I networked and I had coffee chats, I was able to sort of, eavesdrop or learn a couple of, things from them. But at the same time, it's very different from actually having like a dedicated platform, right? That teaches you all the A to Z about applying to, consulting or investment banking, anything that you need to know about it. Because at the time I was, using generic CV or cover letter to sort of apply to every single spring weeks, let alone banking, but also consulting. But also at the same time, I just didn't know how to even approach or prepare for technical interviews. Yes, there was Google. Yes, there were some YouTube videos, but obviously like they can be quite outdated as well. It's not fresh information. So for me, like the information availability was the biggest challenge. And I guess like if there was a show like this or if there was any other platform, which I think nowadays there's a lot more, I would have benefited from it a lot more. But yeah, I think that was the biggest challenge for me.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the as you've kind of mentioned, kind of alluded to, is that's what we're really trying to attack, and I'm guessing you're really trying to attack with your own TikTok. And I guess I'm going to quickly use this opportunity to shout ourselves out as well, because like I know for now we're just like our main thing is the podcast, but we'll be releasing so much more content for our viewers and listeners, just so that they can like all the talent out there, they can access information easily about these high quality jobs. But back to the podcast anyway. So now a kind of like follow up question from that then. So did you ever have doubts on your ability to succeed in this industry? I know it's a very direct question, but what do you think?
You know what? There's an interesting bell curve that I would describe it as the confidence bell curve, and it sort of goes from breaking into LSE. You've probably seen those memes. It's like you're very confident that you're going to land a six-figure job, as a first-year student coming into university, like, hey, I've made it into, this course at this prestigious university. And then as the year goes by, your confidence slowly withers down. So initially, yes, like as a first year, I was very ambitious. I thought I would be able to nail down a Goldman Sachs internship. Oh, that's nothing. But in second year, sort of lower my expectation and be like, okay, maybe not investment banking, but maybe let's settle for consulting. And I wasn't able to land anything. And then third year, I'm just thinking like, I'm not trying to rank any, jobs or anything, but just like in terms of, ease of getting in, on third year, I was like, okay, fine, even an audit job, I would be happy with it. So I guess my confidence sort of whittled down throughout the years. I guess intrinsically, I've always been a very confident person, so I did believe in myself. But at the end of the third year, where I didn't have any offers from any firms, especially after failing 7 final rounds in my final year, that I think I took a big hit in terms of my confidence and my self-esteem as well. And if it wasn't for obviously my partner, my parents supporting me and saying, hey, why don't you do a master's? I think, given that you've made it to 7 final rounds, you can, push a little bit more and you should be able to land an offer. If it weren't for them, I don't think I would have stayed and pursued on my master's and eventually gotten a job. So yeah, I think, yeah, definitely. And I think it happens with a lot of students as well. I obviously mentor a lot of students right now, and especially students in their third year or the final master's year, they have a lot of stress, especially international students. I think nowadays you have those 2-year visa that you can apply for and stay in the UK. But I guess back in the days where I was applying, it was 4 months, and if you don't get a job after graduating, you're deported back into your country. So the pressure was a bit more intense then. So yeah, I mean, I guess like it sort of followed the bell curve, and at the end, I was able to get an offer, so it kind of shot back up. But
Wow, yeah, that's a very again a very transparent answer, and again I really appreciate that. I've got a follow up question again. It's like they're all just follow up questions, but it's a final question on this section, I think. So you covered doubts when you just explained the doubts you had as a student looking forward, but now that you've made it in the industry and you're continuing to progress, do you have any doubts in your day to day when you're kind of, where am I going to kind of end up, or etc.? I just want to see what that sort of mindset is like because we're just students as well, so we don't know what it's like. So just that might be a bit of a weirder question, but interested to hear your take.
yeah, honestly, I think life is always a continuation of examinations and self-doubt. And I think especially, well, consulting, but also if you go to super high pressure financial services jobs as well, it is a very intense environment. Obviously the degree of it varies between firms, but I think any job is very tough for a graduate to come in. And for me as well, I wouldn't say I have an imposter syndrome, but I always do feel like my colleagues or my cohort of people are always better than me at my job. And so every sort of 3 months, let's say you have a performance review, and that itself is already a huge pressure in terms of, okay, did I pass this round? Am I going to end up in a performance improvement plan and then get sacked 3 months later? There's always that doubt that sort of formulates as you work in the consulting or the financial services industry. But I think like it's much less compared to the pressure that I faced when I was a student, because once you're in the company, and obviously varies by firm, but generally they tend to give you a bit of leeway, and you kind of have like a clear goal of, if I achieve this or if I follow this through in a skill tracker, then obviously then I am performing at this level. There's more transparency in terms of how you perform versus an application. If you think about it, there isn't really a transparent method to judge, okay, like you didn't get through because of XYZ reasons. There could be a fundamental reason behind it, but a lot of the times I feel like a luck plays a huge factor in getting a job as well, right? Because big companies like Goldman Sachs, I think the CEO said they receive about 220,000 applications and they hire less than 1%, right? So then who reviews all those CVs, right? And I'm sure there's stellar CVs as well. So it really comes down to luck as well in terms of applications. So I think the pressure itself, for me, like looking back to it, was a lot more intense as a student than now. And even now, obviously, like I have day-to-day pressure in terms of I need to perform well in the job. But because I've been doing the job for such a long time now, 5+ years, sort of I've kind of, I wouldn't say comfortable, but I'm at the position where I know what I'm doing. I have some track record of performing well, so I know I can trust myself. I've had those moments where I've excelled as well. I know where my strengths are. I know where my development goals are. So I think it's a much easier conversation to have with yourself and being like, here are the things I need to improve on, and that's very transparent and it's very, very easy to see compared to when you were a student.
Wow, I mean, I think that's been one of the strongest starts to an episode we've ever had, and I'm enjoying it. So I think I'm going to quickly move on to the next section as well. So now talking more about university life. Now you mentioned you did a master's and a bachelor's at LSE, the London School of Economics. Now I know you've already answered this or you've hinted at this, but could you give us a more direct response on how did you find attending that uni whilst aiming for a career in finance, and then what were the challenges that came with that?
So LSE, I mean, I loved it. It's full of nerds for sure. Maybe less than Imperial. No beef, but yeah. And honestly, LSE is a like if you guys want to do finance, and I think LSE is a very good school to go, especially like econ at LSE. If I look at all like a lot of my friends that are now in investment banking, a lot of them have done econ or econ related subjects at LSE or other universities as well, right? That's sort of the fastest gateway into financial services. So in terms of trajectory into finance, I think LSE is a great sort of university to attend. Obviously, that comes with the pressure and also the constant competition and comparison of yourself with other peers as well. In the sense that, as I mentioned, in the first week they already tell you or ask you which spring weeks did you apply to. So if you have a competitive mindset and you're confident about yourself, you know that you can excel in your job, in your academics, and you can do other extracurricular activities, then it's a great uni. In terms of student life, I think I think probably UCL, KCL, other London unis, or even other sort of campus life unis would have been better. And I mean, I wanted a campus life. That's like that was my dream of going to university. But obviously, as you guys know, LSE in the middle of Holborn, we have like 5 buildings, and that's about it. It's more like an office than an actual campus. So in that sense, it wasn't as amazing, but solely from a career perspective, I think it does generate that ROI for international students, for local students, for whoever. As long as you're willing to do it, there are lots of opportunities, and also the proximity as well that London universities have to like finance hubs like Canary Wharf, Bank, Liverpool Street, Mayfair. It's very easy to get to, right? Whilst if you're in sort of other parts of England or Scotland, Wales, it's much harder to sort of attend these networking events, get to meet these professionals in a lifetime. So I think like that proximity also definitely helps as well.
Yeah, that was a really great answer and a great way to kick off that section about university life. I wanted to. So there's a quote within the student sort of community, which is university is what you make it. So I think now we're very blessed to be within a community and an industry where university still does have a factor, don't get me wrong, especially for the bigger firms, but then it is also a case of if you go to LSE or to your Imperial, your like Warwick's or your Oxbridge, you can't just coast through and expect to receive a role afterwards, or that kind of sense of entitlement I think has kind of decreased a little bit. And for students in those unis that are a little less recognised, maybe non-targets or semi-targets or non-Russell group, they feel like they can do more than those who are in those target unis and still make it. So I think that attitude has maybe changed, which is great to see. But what's kind of your take on it? What's your advice to those who are not in those target unis and are still trying to get those elite roles within financial services?
For sure. And I'm actually going to quote Swiss Chris. I don't know if you guys know him. He's the guy that does the, yeah. So I had him. So we had a call the other day, and because he comes from a non-target, and so he's made it into investment banking, and then now obviously private equity. Really good guy, funny guy. And he was telling me that like he basically had to be the best guy at his university because like, and he acknowledges as well, right? I mean, and I completely agree with him. It's that if you come from a non-target university, the chances are going to be much lower than coming from a target university. Unfortunate, but it is somewhat of a dynamic that is already set in the financial industry, for instance. I mean, I do recognize that and acknowledge that there may be smarter students in non-target universities, but just on average, I think that's how it plans out. But at the same time, if, for example, Goldman Sachs comes to your university, if you go to a non-target, and then they need to pick that one person from your university, you basically have to be that guy or that girl, right? Because otherwise, why would they hire you over a ton of thousands of target university students that are equally, if not better qualified to get that job? So his take, and I agree with Swiss Chris, is that you basically need to be the best version of yourself, whether that's within your course or within your society, within your uni, I don't care. You need to be the best version in terms of academics, work experiences, extracurricular, maximize all of it. Basically CV maxing, if you call it in Gen Z terms, to then have an appeal to those top tier financial services firms to say, hey, I know I come from a non-target, but I have these qualities that are actually better, if not on par with students from target universities. And that's how he was able to break in. That's the advice that I would give as well, is that you just need to be on your A game from first year all the way to third year. And I think the most important aspect is your grade itself. If you don't have a first class honors, I think it's going to be challenging to break into financial service. Obviously, you still can if you have other great stuff, but as a basis, and I've been in recruiting, and lots of my friends are in recruiting in FSIB, and unfortunately, and also at the same time, what the truth is, they do look at your grade, which is very important. So making sure that you have that first class honor starting from first year all the way to third year, and then every other thing sort of supplements your CV, is going to be the deciding factor in you breaking into sort of the financial services or consulting industry. I think consulting is a bit less strict in the sense that we welcome candidates from a much more variety of backgrounds. But I think traditional finance, especially, is still a bit rigid. They still prefer students that come from Target. And obviously, yes, there are. I mean, I've done a fun post about, okay, how many investment bankers come from Goldman Sachs, come from each universities, and it's predominantly like LSE, Oxbridge, and there are loads from like other unis like Exeter, Manchester, Surrey, blah blah blah. But obviously, the numbers are very small, maybe like a handful a year. And I'm sure those students are sort of top of their class or top of their uni even. So yeah, I think just be in your A game and CV max.
Yeah, no, I think, and direct advice like that, it needs to be like a strong reality check. Like I go Nottingham, and then for me, when I walked into my first year, I thought because I had like this podcast thing behind me, it'd literally be the easiest thing in the world. But then I had to realize, okay, I need to perfect everything. It can't just be having my extracurricular behind me, but it should also be okay, my uni grades need to be top notch. My technical skills, networking, whatever, it needs to be top notch. And I think that direct advice will be very useful for us and our listeners. But then, kind of a related question, then, Jack. So, from your LinkedIn, and then of course, you've told us as well that you've spent a lot of time networking, and then of course with other extracurriculars as well, and you of course attended LSE studying there. Now, how did you manage doing all of those things together then? What advice can you give to students who are trying to be more proactive in their university game and CV max, as you said?
Yeah, so to CV max, we can start from obviously academics and then work through. So full transparency, my weakest part of my CV has always been work experience. I was not able to do any internship in the UK until my master's year. So any internship that I did until my third year was all in Korea, which doesn't, I mean, UK firms don't really give a damn about it, right? It was like small startups and consulting firms as well. So that's sort of the weakest part. And yeah, I don't honestly, yeah, not too much to provide advice there because I wasn't able to land many internships myself. But in terms of balancing academics and extracurriculars at the same time, I guess it comes with trade-offs, right? Like do just enough so that you can get that first class honors. And I know by degree it varies. So for example, if you're doing law, for instance, which is very like essay heavy, I know it's much harder to get a first compared to if you're doing I guess management, for instance. Like I did management, and LSE people take a piss saying it's the easiest subject, and I don't disagree. It probably is. a lot of students do get a first in management, but it's because we have a lot of sort of quantitative modules that you can study hard and get like near close to 100% in. So it's a balance of like, hey, obviously, because like in first year, it depends on university, but for us, the first year grades didn't really matter towards your second or third year, or at least it mattered very little. So first year, like I was okay not having full first in my modules, as long as provided that I could do well in my second and third year, and also be strategic about it. As what I mean by that is like if you've achieved first in your first and second year, then that means like for me it meant even if I get all 2 1s in my third year, I would still average a first. So knowing that, I was then able to spend a lot more time doing extracurriculars as well as networking and job hunt on my third year. So I think if you have a strong fundamental basis building up from your first and second year, that then allows you to sort of focus on other things in your third year. At the same time, let's say in your first and second year, you had some fun at uni as you should, and then maybe you did some extracurriculars, did lots of society, which is amazing, but then your grades aren't good. Then I guess third year you should really focus on nailing your academics, right? So it's like planning out your strategy and making sure that you get both your academics and extracurriculars right, based on obviously like the grades that you achieve in your first and second year. That should sort of inform your third year strategy going forward. But generally, I mean, I worked as well part-time as a waiter at a restaurant too, because my parents didn't fund my sort of living costs. Obviously, they did my tuition, but not my living costs. And I guess like balancing time wise, just sleep less, guys. I mean, I
Yeah.
sleep a lot now. I'm old, so I need my 7-8 hours sleep. But in uni, I would sleep 4 or 5 hours, get by with it. Maybe Sunday spend a lot of time sleeping. But I mean, you're very young. You should experience a lot of things. Try to do everything that
Yeah.
you can. So yeah, I think sleep less and try to do more things.
I couldn't agree more, and hopefully my parents take heed in what you've just said as well, to prove that the late nights are for a good reason.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to ask one last question on this topic, and you kind of touched on obviously doing a master's, and then you managed to get internships when you started that. So what significance did doing a master's have on your career journey, would you say?
Yeah. So really good question. I think so for me personally, I think it came down to I guess three things. Number one is the master degree in itself. I know it's from the same uni and the same course, which for me it doesn't make sense. And I know people can give shit about it, and if you guys leave comments saying, "Oh, that was a stupid decision," I fully understand. But I guess even that being said, like masters itself, obviously it's a master's degree, right? It's higher than a bachelor's degree, so that sort of added on that point of my CV, is my belief. And second of all, it's the people as well. So I did master's management at LSE, and actually like in the beginning of our course in September, we did a survey across all our students in my cohort saying, hey, what do you guys want to do? And I think it was something like 88% of the students said they wanted to do consulting, which was very good for me personally because I wanted to do consulting too. So all of us would sort of gather around, do case studies, prep for interviews. We can also like inform each other of like, hey, apply to this firm by when, hey, let's prep interviews together. So we were able to create that tight knit sort of bond environment doing the same course. Similar for financial services too, right? If you do masters in finance at LSE, I'm sure 90% of them would want to go into banking or some sort of financial services industry. So then you are able to form sort of groups within your course that then prepares for the interviews together, which I think helps a lot. And also secondly, when you do a master's, not everyone is like a fresh grad. So some people for us like have done consulting before, which is super valuable because they know they've been through the interviews, they've done all the online tests, they've actually worked at the job itself, so they know what it's like. So full transparent opinion, but also like interview tips and guidances. It was like a huge help for me. And same for like finance and other degrees as well, I can imagine. So that was the second part. And then thirdly, I actually did a part-time internship at a startup in London. It was like one of the top fintech startups actually, based in London. The CEO, the founder, she was an ex-Bain director, I think. So I was able to learn a lot, obviously, from her in terms of how consultants think and operate. But at the same time, because me personally, I did not have any work experience in London, I felt that was probably one of the reasons why I wasn't able to sort of proceed further in terms of interview rounds. So then having that experience of working in a company in London and not in Korea, I think really helped sort of to maximize or boost my CV, which then allowed me to ultimately land several offers at the end of my final year. At the end of my master's year.
Hopefully no one who shouldn't hear this hears this, but I hate I hate studying. I want to be working as soon as possible. But then considering that like the master's actually does help to that extent, it is something that I may have to consider because I believe it could just set me so much stronger and stronger for me pursuing my career path. But I guess that's a nice way to close off that section of the episode. And now moving on to like more your career journey and then your progression. Now, you mentioned at the start of the episode what your career progression was, but just to kick off this section of the episode, could you tell us what your career journey has been so far and the different internship experiences you've been through?
Yeah, sounds good. So my career path has been pretty interesting, I would say. First year I did a marketing internship in Korea. Second and third year, I did a consulting / FS internship as well. And then my master's year, as I mentioned, I did my fintech part-time internship during my master's, so in parallel to my studies. And then I was able to get a job at a boutique consulting firm specializing in the telecommunications sector. I worked there for about 3 to 4 months and then was fortunate enough to land an offer from a tier 2 consulting firm who specialized in education sector, but also a lot of due diligences, which is in the private equity industry. So did that for about a year and a half. And funny story there is like I actually got the offer and then my visa 1 week before my student visa expired. So it was a
Whoa.
very tight timeline for me. Otherwise, I might have been deported. So that was a nerve-wracking period for me. And then yeah, I was at this firm called UI Parthenon for about a year and a half, and then actually it was a booming period. So I actually got really lucky because that period in 2021, end of 2021, a lot of MBB were hiring from the tier two companies, especially consultants that had due diligence experiences. So a lot of my cohort actually left to MBB. I was actually poached by MBB. So I interviewed for all three MBB, and then yeah, decided to go with one of them, which I thought I had a better cultural fit. So that's been my career journey.
Amazing, amazing. And this is my personal favorite part of the episode, this sort of section and the future sections as well, just because we've done a great sort of job of painting the picture of kind of how you got to where you are now, but let's actually dive into it. So I know we spoke about doubt a little bit at the top of the episode, but were there any moments in kind of your career, especially when you were maybe transitioning between jobs or firms or kind of different transition points and inflection points within your journey, did you ever feel completely out of your depth? And how did you handle that feeling?
Good question. Honestly, yes. Coming from, I think, well, there were two humps, right? First of all, was going from a master's student into my first boutique consultancy job. I felt like I was not adding any value. I was like, why did they even hire me? Because I'm not really doing anything at work. And honestly, it was it was a small firm though, and I think that was actually very beneficial for me because it's a small firm, you tend to get a lot of responsibility from earlier on. And so even though I was sort of like a graduate intern, kind of, which had like a graduate offer towards the end, like they sort of was able to provide me with lots of opportunities to sort of take on responsibilities much more quickly. So initially, obviously, when they gave me tasks like Excel modeling or expert interviews, I had no clue how to run them or do them. So I would just sit at my desk and be like, I mean, they've given me a task, the consultant's given me a task, but I don't know what to do. But then he's in a call for like the next 2 hours. So what am I going to do? So I had a lot of these doubt moments. Fortunately enough, because it was a smaller firm, I was able to sort of go to other consultants and be more proactive in terms of getting advice from them. And I think this is what a lot of students should try to do. The first 6 months or first year even of your career journey, it's really just about learning and development. So, and especially in my firm currently and my previous firm as well, like in the first 6 months, your grades don't really matter that much. Obviously, there are some stellar candidates or stellar consultants that do a good job, but I mean, it really is about asking those dumbest questions that you can even think of, even questions like, how do you open this Excel, or like, how do you undo a zip file, for instance? These are the questions that I asked as well, right? I mean, coming from university, I knew nothing about them. So it was stupid, but because I'm in the first 6 months of my career, like it was acceptable. So I would say like asking those dumb questions as many times as possible has been sort of the pivotal thing that helped me develop fast in those first 6 to 12 months. And even now, obviously, as a consultant or even as a banker, you may get placed on different projects, right? Where you work with different assets, different companies. And oftentimes you need to sort of understand the company, the industry in a very fast-paced manner in the first couple of days. And even in those few days, you still do ask stupid questions to like experts, to partners or MDs that have the expertise, just so that you can absorb all the information that they've gathered over 20 plus years of their experience. And in those time periods, it's completely fine because they don't expect you to have full knowledge, right? Coming fresh into a project. So I guess like first of all, going from masters to a real working environment, that was sort of my way of coping. I guess my inability to do things as a consultant. And then going from EY Parthenon, which obviously is an amazing firm too, but then to MBB was another pivotal moment in terms of the work itself, because yes, EY Parthenon was always intense too. And I actually worked longer hours at EY Parthenon than I do currently at MBB. Mostly because of resource constraints. I think there's a much better support system that exists in MBB versus smaller firms. Not sure about now. But also at the same time, EY Parthenon was a sort of a much smaller firm. I think the headcount was only 90 when I joined. So still very, collegiate, very family-like. People were very nice and willing to help you. Not saying my current firm doesn't, but The culture itself was slightly different. And also the deals that I worked on was much smaller. So at UI Parthenon, I would mostly work on mid-market, lower mid-market deals, which, in the region of 50, couple of hundred, maybe maximum deals, if especially working with private equity clients. Coming to MBB, when I did my due diligence projects, you could be working with mega funds that are doing billion deals as well. So the pressure itself was much more intense, especially as mega funds tend to be a bit more intense as well, I would say. So that transition in terms of mindset of like at UI Parthenon, where I could just be like, hey, let's get my shit done. And if I do it well, then I can take a bit of a chill pill, to going into MBB where it's like, hey, I need to ace this shit and also go above and beyond to even outperform the candidates the colleagues and the cohort that have joined with me, because they're all coming from such smart backgrounds, all of the experienced hires themselves. So that mindset shift was the hardest thing. And it got to a point where in my second year at MBB, I was having nightmares and dreams about getting my Excel model wrong. And it's no joke. And I know compared to banking, the model itself isn't that complicated. But at the same time, I was having like nightmares on this one project because I was like literally doing models to like 2, 3 a.m. every single day, getting 4 hours sleep, back up, blah, 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 continue onwards. So yeah, honestly, that mindset shift was super hard. And what actually got me out of it was I was having a mentor chat with a partner who has been at this company for more than 25 years. And I was asking the same question, how do you do it? Because for me, it's the hardest part. And oftentimes the second or third year at banking or consulting, it's the hardest part because that's when you're, for example, an associate at investment bank, or that's when you're, I guess, like a consultant at a MBB, for instance. And that's when you're actually doing the bulk of the work because you know the most, and like you're kind of in the middle, right? Managing your analyst, but at the same time you're reporting to your VP. So that's the most pressurizing environment. And the partner said to me, look, Jack, at the end of the day, you're not saving lives. You're not a doctor, right? I mean, yes, you're making your stakeholders happy and maximizing their value, which is amazing and can be interesting. But at the same time, no one dies just because you don't finish that model today. And at the end of the day, like, yes, like your performance might take a bit of a hit. And yes, you might have to come back from that. Or sometimes, like it might not even work out for you at this company. And FS or consulting, if you can't handle the pressure, I mean, it's not for everyone, right? So I think that allowed me to sort of go into more of an ease in terms of mindset. And being like, you know what, I'm going to do my best job, but at the same time, I'm not going to burn myself for it and go bold at the age of 25 just because I need to maximize some stakeholder value. So yeah, after that chat, I think that's what really like helped me, set my expectations, right? Especially in the beginning of projects as well. I would say, hey, I'm going to do my best to do a great job at this project, but like, I'm not going to kill myself. I'm not that desperate about getting the fastest promotion ever in the firm's history, right? So I guess like it depends on where your priorities lie. But yeah, that conversation I think for me was quite pivotal.
Wow, I mean that's just like it's really great that you've pushed on that advice to us as well, because in certain cases it's like when you do work with like a lot of pressure against you as well, sometimes the work itself isn't even of high quality, and so that is something really smart that partner gave you an advice. So when you're speaking more about being proactive in like once you had an internship and something, and I think that's something that people should start earlier on as well. Like I was lucky enough to attend a couple of spring weeks, and during that time a lot of people were just staying quiet the whole time. Like whenever there was time to ask questions, like a vast majority, like 80-90% would just be quiet and not ask any questions at all. And like that's basically like not an opportunity that you'll come across. So I think that's one thing students should really focus on, is like if you've got an opportunity to ask a question, just ask it. Doesn't matter if it's stupid or dumb, as you said. But I guess the next question is, what were the biggest misconceptions you've had or people have about the consulting industry, and what's your take on them?
Yeah, honestly, I have a lot to say here. I would say the biggest thing is that consultants are just evil PowerPoint monkeys that come in and sack everyone and advise on things that they know nothing about, which I used it as a topic for my satire videos too.
Yeah.
I would say it's not 100% misconception in the sense that yes, we do come in as like a 20 to 23-year-old graduate, and then we advise on businesses that are, billions and billions of pounds on their projects that cost the billions and billions of pounds. And yes, there can be projects where you might, consultants come in and have to sort of restructure things a bit, which results in layoffs. But I just want to say, proudly that I've never done a cost-cutting project, first of all. So I've got my morals.
Congrats.
Yeah. And second of all, those projects are much rarer. Obviously, during economic downturns, they tend to be a bit more frequent. But at the end of the day, there are multiple different projects that you could do as a consultant. So for me, my specialty is in due diligence. I did a lot of them, obviously working with private equity companies. Obviously, it's not saving the world, but again, it's not cutting people doing layoffs. So, and at the same time, like, yes, as consultants, we do come in as a 23-year-old analyst and we do work on these projects, but like, I think what people need to distinguish is that we don't come in as a 20-something-year-old and start advising CEOs what they should do, right? That's more of the partners or MDs that have 25 plus 30 years of experience that sort of interact with those senior clients. As consultants, you have a client map, as we call it, which, for example, if you're a fresh graduate or an analyst or an associate, you might, work directly with a manager or a senior manager in the client's team. And then obviously, as your grade goes up, your client map the seniority of your client map goes up as well. At the same time as well, you're not directly influencing, or I guess you could influence, but you're not directly sort of, opinionating your own thoughts in terms of how to run a business. As consultants, especially when you first join a company, and for the first couple of years, actually, a lot of the things you do is data analysis. So analyzing client data, but also market and industry trends, and then sort of using that to inform clients what the best decisions might be. For example, if it's a growth strategy project, like which international, country should we expand to next? You run a bunch of analysis. That's the role of a consultant. Like, not me myself, but like, when I was more junior, that would be me doing a lot of those data analysis and then informing them of the outcome and the analysis output itself. And then it's the client, obviously, decision to make, right? Like, they take our recommendation analysis and they make the final decision. But I think a lot of the times, and to be honest, sometimes they don't take our decision and they just do whatever they want, and that happens. But I think a lot of the misconception is that we just come in and we just, throw things around and, the CEOs have to listen to us. But I guess, like, a lot of the times they hire us because they might already want to do something. For example, they might need to do restructuring, but obviously they don't want to do it from their own end. So then they hire consultants and say, hey, the consultants advised us that we need to restructure 20% of our business to get us back into track in terms of growth. So, use us as more of a scapegoat to sort of, implement the strategy they already had in mind. So I think that's probably the most common misconception. The other thing is, like, consultants enjoy a lavish lifestyle, which I guess is similar to banking as well, right? It's like you fly business class, private jets, nice fancy food, I don't know, models everywhere, as you've seen on like Swiss Chris, videos, like you see all of these fancy things, which to a degree can be true, but at the same time it's like pretty limited to when you're traveling for business, for instance. You're traveling to a client site, and there are certain rules that are set in stone as well. For example, only international flights only. And actually tiring, traveling is really tiring, because think about if you have a case, let's say, I don't know, like, let's say I have a case in Korea, right? I need to commute to Korea every week. Then I need to wake up at Sunday, and then fly to Korea, get to Korea for Monday 9 a.m., go to client site, and then Thursday night, take the flight back to London, Friday, still go to work. And then I get 1 day Saturday, and then Sunday I repeat again. So actually the first couple of times might be very, very, exciting and interesting, but if you have to repeat that travel life, oh man, it gets really, really tiring. So I think that's probably the second misconception that people have.
That was a great answer. I think that was my favorite answer throughout the whole episode, because that is genuinely, I mean, don't judge me, but even my misconception of the consulting industry was a little bit like that as well. So I'm really glad you cleared that up. I think that's the biggest takeaway us as sort of students can take from this episode, alongside everything else that you've dropped. The last question I'm going to ask on this section, I think, is something we like to ask a lot, just because, and to be fair, you have kind of answered this, but more specifically, What are some skills that you think have been crucial in helping you succeed across all the different roles and experiences and responsibilities that you've held across your journey?
Yeah, it's a good question. It I think the skills required to, become a successful consultant or even a banker or a financial services consultant, it varies by the stage of your career. So I would say coming in as a fresh graduate, a lot of what you're going to be doing is analysis, research, right? Very data focused things. So as a fresh graduate, what you need to really focus on nailing is mastering those analysis skill sets, research skill sets, etc. And then once you get good at that, at a mid level, it's more about stakeholder management, whether that be junior, but also could be senior as well. And then going above and beyond that, and then it really just becomes a salesy job. So your skill set, I think, what you require to succeed, across the three different, I guess, levels of your career path from junior, mid to senior varies. For me, though, I would say one thing that I didn't realize was important, but was important, is the ability to really self advocate for yourself. And the reason why that's
Yeah.
important is coming from an Eastern culture, right? Like I've been taught to be very humble about myself, always don't overshare your achievements, etc. And then I was going for an early promotion in one of my companies, but I actually didn't get it. And then I was like to my senior manager, "Oh, why didn't I get it?" And the senior manager was like, "Well, you never told me you wanted it." So even though she was like, "If you told me and I could have advocated for you and you could have probably gotten it because you're outperforming, but I never knew that you wanted it." So at the first place, like she didn't even advocate for me. So then I realized how important it is to, I'm not saying to show off and be like, "Hey, I did all of these things," but having regular sort of professional development or career chats with your mentors or your supervisors and saying, it could be on a weekly or a monthly basis, however, whatever cadence you set, and being like, "Hey, I think I'm performing at this level because I've done, A, B, C, D, E. Do you agree or disagree?" Obviously not in that hostile manner, but just like having a discussion around your performance on a weekly or, every 2 week basis to understand where you're at in terms of your performance and how you can improve and what are some of the things that are most crucial for you to improve. I think sets you apart from many other sort of consultants or bankers who just kind of do the job and try to be good at the job. Again, this comes back to the proactiveness, right? That Noman you mentioned. It's like it
Yeah.
still applies in the job in itself as well. It's like you need to be proactive about your own professional development, and that's like I guess probably one of the most important skill sets that would allow you to sort of I guess jump through the different hoops and get promoted quickly if that is your goal.
Yeah, and well, hopefully us and our viewers can really, um, I guess, capitalize on that advice as much as possible because it's one thing breaking into like your dream job, but then of course you don't want to be like an analyst forever, do you? So that advice I think will be really strong for, I mean, even me and Ali. But I guess we had another section, but you've just answered, like, you've done our job for us, Jax. You've answered all the questions so like uh, integrated into your different responses. So we're going to jump straight into your activities outside of finance then. So
Sure.
could you now, of course, a lot of people know you as the Korean consultant on TikTok and Instagram. Now, talk to us about your TikTok account. What inspired you to start this then?
Yeah, you know what? Actually, I had a YouTube channel first. I uploaded my
Okay.
first YouTube video in 2021 or end of 21, which was really about, providing information to international students who may not have the opportunity to access information on how to break into consulting. So it was a four-part series laying out all the different aspects from networking, CV, case interviews to like final advice in terms of how to break into consulting. That sort of started it. And it was purely just from the idea of like, hey, you know what, like I didn't have the information, so why don't I share with
Hmm.
students what I learned throughout getting the offer. So that was what started it. And then after I moved to MBB, I then started to think about, okay, now I've not only started at a boutique, but then I went to tier two, and then now I'm at MBB. So I thought, okay, maybe people might also be interested in not only how I got the job, but also how I went through different hoops to be at one of the top consulting firms. And then that sort of sparked my interest on TikTok. And actually, the first couple of videos I posted on TikTok were dance covers. I deleted them now, so no one can see them.
Oh.
But back in during COVID period, like it was all about dance covers, right? They didn't have any sort of informative videos or anything. So I did a couple of them. Some of them did well, got a couple of thousand views. But then yeah, I was like, okay, this is not my forte. So then I posted a video which was around all my failures in terms of getting 50 100 plus rejections, and then finally getting an offer, and then that really did well. And so from then on, I started to think about what I want to I guess portray in terms of my TikTok channel, which was like two things. Number one, sort of educational content in terms of, I guess, same as you guys, providing information about consulting, banking, but also other types of jobs as well, when it comes to salary, breaking in, whatever. And then second of all, some entertainment content as well. So I think that particularly the videos that did well last year were like, I did some like uni scales and stuff. They kind of did very well as well. So yeah, trying to mix a bit of like entertainment, but at the same time, educational videos as well. That's sort of where my purpose for TikTok and Instagram currently lies.
Yeah, I mean, it may seem like we're saying I'm saying this for the purpose of this video, but I generally like, I love your content. It's because I think for me, when I was like, this is more like end of last year-ish, when I was trying to learn more about the industry itself. I used to like watch a lot of your videos because it was like a great starting point, because of course there's only so much you can put in a TikTok, but even that you packed a lot, and I really love your videos. But then
Appreciate it.
another question then on your whole TikTok channel and your Instagram account. So how do you find time to like create these videos, edit them, upload them alongside working at a top tier consulting firm? Because we do our podcast, and it's hectic of the amount of time it takes. I know our podcasts are a bit longer, but still, how do you find that time?
Yeah, so I think I found a good balance of leveraging my weekends to just bulk film all my TikTok videos, and then just like
Okay.
posting them on, like, so every day I would just post one. So on the weekend I would make between 5 to 7, and then so I would post like one a day, so it has like a backlog. So yeah, I definitely do leverage a lot of my weekends. At the same time as well, in consulting and same for banking, sometimes you're on the bench, which means you're not on any project, chilling about, working on like
Hmm.
business development stuff, but that's like usually 9 to 5, which means that you have the evenings where you can still
Yeah.
edit and film. So I try to leverage that as well. And also, like, to be honest, I don't think my content is that high quality in terms of the editing in itself, because I leverage a lot of like CapCut's pre-made templates, as well as sort of the
Oh,
TikToks,
okay.
yeah, auto caption and stuff. So yeah, I think like, definitely there's a lot of room for me to improve in terms of my quality of the content. But in terms of like just churning out content, I just use weekends plus like the automated features available on TikTok.
I think the quality of content is very high. I think it comes across that you're spending less on how it looks and more on what actually the value you bring, which I think is more appreciated by the audience you're aiming for. So I think maybe that's another way to look at it. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, we're coming on to the last section of the episode, which is it's bittersweet because it's been such a great episode. But we're coming on to some of my favorite questions to ask every guest. But to kick this off, I just want to ask you kind of, in sort of 5 to 10 years time, what does the future look like for you? What are you aiming for, and what are you expecting?
Great question, Ali. I would be an entrepreneur. I've always been really
Hmm.
passionate about education, mentorship as well. So
Yeah.
ideally, I'd have a venture in an EdTech business, or even just like
Okay.
a coaching, or I guess like a mentoring business. I'd love to set it up. I've got a best friend called Ali as well, and he runs like a consulting specific website that helps students break into consulting. So if I were to ever
Okay.
quit consulting, then I would love to join his venture and then sort of expand that and into other different industries as well going forward. So that'd probably be my goal. I definitely wouldn't be in consulting, and I don't care if my employer sees this. They probably know as well. I don't intend on being a partner. Might change in the future, but for now, I
Yeah.
don't really want to stay in consulting that long term. I am motivated by results. So that's why I love gaming. That's why I love sports as well, because there's always results.
Hmm.
And obviously, yes, the process matters too. But for me, what motivates me is results and my like ownership as well. And my me being able to control things. A bit manipulative, some people can say, but that's what I love. So I want to start my own venture. and yeah, taking from there. And yeah, 5-10 years, hopefully I'll have an EdTech venture. I might, even have a consumer venture as well. But yeah, I don't think I would be in professional services or working for someone else. I think that's probably my, big goal that I have.
Fair enough. We appreciate the transparency. But then, looking back on your career journey, what are you most proud of? That's another question for you then.
Ah, tough question, because like I could say I'm proud of, being an outperforming consultant for the last couple of cycles, those generic answers. But really, am I proud of that? I
Mm.
guess superficially speaking, probably yes, I am proud of it. And okay, again, also like proud of being able to go from boutique to a tier two and then to top consulting firm. That's also, I guess, like from outsider's perspective, I'm very proud of that too. But for me, more intrinsically, what I'm more proud of is, especially at this company, having had the opportunity to actually experience different types of roles as well as industries and projects. So I not only just did due diligence, but also within the ring fence, I did a placement at in a generative AI ring fence where I worked on a lot of Gen AI projects, which was super interesting. And now I'm doing the general consulting project as well, which is sort of doing a lot of like digital transformation, technical implementation. So, like in terms of the breadth and the depth of experiences I was able to accumulate, versus I guess I don't really like comparing, but like versus other sort of consultants, I felt like I've sort of maximize a lot of the opportunities there. So that's probably what I'm most
Okay.
proud of. Because yeah, that really allowed me to then, pigeonhole in terms of, okay, like I've done all these experiences. What is something that I enjoyed the most out of all of these? And then think about, okay, applying that to then my venture, what is my next step? So
Mm.
that's probably, intrinsically speaking, that probably is what I'm most proud of.
Amazing. And including that question, these are the last three questions of the episode that, again, we asked to every guest because each answer was as unique as the previous one. And that was evidence of that. So the next one that I really love to ask, and you've probably heard it before, but if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
It's funny because I was in Canary Wharf last week asking these questions to to
Oh, wow.
bankers. So,
Amazing. Amazing.
yeah. And the most common answer I got, which might be different to my answer, is that like 18-year-old yourself or 20-year-old yourself, like you're young, all you have is time. So
Mm.
try out different things. Don't be fixated or pigeonholed into one career path just because you, I don't know, want to be an investment banker or a consultant. Like for me as well, like initially I tried out investment banking and didn't work, and then when it's consulting as well, right? So try out different things as you can, which means like try out different societies. Like I even attended a chocolate making or a wine tasting society, like all these weird ones,
Mm.
just like because of the sheer opportunity that you get in terms of meeting a variety of people, which I think is super, super important because any job that you do, networking and also because building relationship is a huge part of your whole career, right? And if you can do that from a young age by meeting a variety of people, understanding how people think and also interact as well, that really gives you an edge as you enter the corporate world where you're faced with lots of office politics, for instance. So that's one thing. The other thing is, yeah, probably have more fun, honestly. I think I felt like I mean I did have a lot of fun as a uni student, but like in thinking back to it, I probably should have had more fun, right? And not be so stressed about not being able to like get a job because at the end of the day, I think that you will land something, whether that's the best you could get, probably not. I mean, I started at a boutique consulting firm paying 18K, which wasn't the
Yeah.
most optimum that I wanted, but at the end of the day, I got to where I am. So yeah, I would say worry less because, and maybe, coming from I might be coming from a more privileged position of like, oh, now that I've achieved it, I can say that. But honestly, like, just worrying less about your future career because like whatever amount of work you put in, you will sort of, read it back. So yeah, I think those would be my two advice to myself.
Wow. Wow. Just amazing advice. And it's getting very like bittersweet now because this is the last question of the episode and you can finally get rid of us then, Jack. But what is the biggest takeaway you hope for our listeners to get from your story?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to be too generic and be like, hey, it doesn't matter if you don't land the big dream job that you wanted to land and the first go, because you can always, sort of do a good job in your current role and then use that and leverage that to then jump to the next venture and then finally get to where you are, which is what I did. I mean, that probably is like, honestly, that probably is one of the important aspects, right? Because I mentor a lot of students, and oftentimes they would land like a decent company offer, but because they didn't land that Goldman Sachs investment banking offer, they're all devastated because that was their dream job. They went to LSE, like they needed to get that job, but at the end of the day, guys, like with any job, like it's up to you to maximize your experiences and learning from that job itself, right? So you could enter a boutique company and learn way more from there, and become a much better consultant or a banker, versus you might end up fine Goldman Sachs or McKinsey and yeah, get in, but then after 3 to 6 months you might not handle the pressure, you might not excel, etc. So I would say like hinge less on the name value of the, I guess, the company that you join, because like you're essentially only borrowing the name value, right? Like no one's gonna remember you as a like no one's gonna remember me as like, I don't know, if even if I say I work in Goldman Sachs, no one's gonna remember me when I die. It's like, oh, he was a Goldman Sachs associate, right?
Yeah.
Like you're just there. Like once you're there, you borrow their name value and be like, hey, he's a Goldman Sachs associate, which is cool. But once you leave the company, like that's not you anymore. So I guess like, really just like try to develop skill sets, develop yourself personally as well, professionally as well, to create like a persona of, okay, what does it mean to be yourself, outside of all those superficial things that you might get from being part of a big company. So yeah, I think that's probably one takeaway.
Yeah, figure out what it means to be yourself. That is one heck of a way to end that amazing episode. Jack, it has been an absolute privilege to speak to you. We've flown through all of our questions and the time has really flown by. I wish we could speak for a lot longer, and I feel like we will maybe in the near future. Naman, anything else you want to add?
I mean, yeah, I think I've taken away a lot from this episode as myself, but then I really know that like this episode is going to be gold for our viewers and listeners, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And for our viewers and listeners, as Naman briefly mentioned there, if you are watching us on YouTube and for some reason you have not hit that subscribe button yet, but you love this episode and liked what you learned, then be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads and the other content that we post on this YouTube channel. And same goes for our audio listeners as well. Hit us a follow on those platforms. You can drop a comment and let us know what topics you want us to cover, or if we should be speaking to someone that we haven't spoken to already on the show, then you can let us know via the comments. And of course, our social media platforms are in the bios of all of our platforms, so you can be sure to check us out on there as well, where we post events, internship opportunities, and other relevant insights and content. And of course, all of Jack's social media links will be in the bio, so you can check his content out there to learn even more about the consulting industry and other misconceptions, as well as reach out to him personally and ask him a few questions that we might not have touched on this episode. But as usual, thank you so much for watching this episode of the Smart Money Show. We will see you next week for another episode, so please do take care and stay tuned.